Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Choose Your Own Adventure, implementing AWP presented by O3 Solutions. So first up, we're going to do a little bit of a recap. Who is O3 Solutions? We're a modern web-based platform that leverages advanced work packaging and agile best practices to disrupt the status quo for companies in industrial construction who want to improve productivity, safety, quality, and predictability. O3 has helped our clients address their unique challenges, including managing change across multiple companies and teams, supporting collaboration across multiple companies and disciplines, automating data connections across different systems and processes, scaling AWP to fit the unique needs of our clients, and driving the adoption of advanced work packaging across the entire project lifecycle. We're also members of several construction industry organizations that are leading the way in AWP development. O3's suite of solutions was purpose-built to support AWP. Unlike other solutions that were designed decades ago and reconfigured to support AWP or cobbled together from multiple legacy technologies, O3 was built from the very beginning to specifically support CII's advanced work packaging best practice. The O3 platform supports AWP from the early planning phases all the way through commissioning and serves all project stakeholders, including everyone from executives to the boots on the ground and all in between. It's a scalable product designed to meet any project size and portfolio's needs. And by way of introduction, for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Andrew Foy. I'm the Director of AWP and Construction Excellence for O3 Solutions. I've got about 16 years in industrial construction, the last 6 of which have been dedicated AWP roles, and I'm currently the Chair of CII's Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee. So nice to meet you all, albeit remotely today. Before we get started, we always like to do a safety moment, and this one particularly relevant to everything that's going on in the world for the last couple of years. Preventative care has plummeted during COVID. And the problem with this is everybody's so worried about going to the hospital, so worried about getting their regular checkups, that a lot of people are pushing off preventative care. So you could have access to things like blood pressure testing, diabetes, cholesterol tests, cancer screenings. There's a general concern that once this COVID passes us by, we're all going to find ourselves with a lot of issues that could have been avoided if we'd been doing some of those preventative measures that we would usually do. So obviously you need to take care of the COVID situation, but we also need to be aware that we're also keeping up our preventative care measures. Okay, so we want to do something a little bit different today to help highlight that not all AWP journeys are the same. Now that we've gone through the introductions and the safety moment, we want to take you on an AWP adventure where you, the audience, get to participate and steer our decisions. We're going to look at several different possible scenarios for AWP implementation, all with good and bad factors to them. And together, we're going to see if we can guide our project to success. At the end, we're going to look at the return on investment for our various scenarios and see if the cost savings help to validate our choices. Then we'll do a quick recap, lessons, and a short Q&A. So this is going to be an interactive session. You will be involved, and we're structuring this as a game book. It's structured in chapters, and at the end of each chapter, you, the audience, will be asked to make a choice. To make a choice, you're going to vote using the poll feature in GoToWebinar. So you don't need to go to another website and enter a code or anything like that. This will all be done right here in GoToWebinar. When each question pops up, just make your selection. So in order to test this, we're going to do a quick poll first up, and the poll has just opened now. So please have a quick look at the first poll question and provide an answer. And we'll give everybody 30 seconds or so to click their answer to the question. Okay, Tori, I'm interested to hear the results now. I can't even see the results on my screen. So how are we doing on the poll? Have we got a lot of people saying yes, they're going to help out, or have we still got a few not sure about us today?
Yeah, about 88%, 92% voted. So I'm going to close it here in about 3 seconds.
Fantastic. Okay, let's see how many people are up for audience participation today. So, Tari, what were the results? Is everybody joining us? Oh, there you go.
76% yes, and 24% not very sure.
Okay, well, for those not very sure, bear with us. We'll try and make it interesting and fun for you. Okay, as part of today's presentation, we're going to walk through different project sizes, the timing of getting started implementing AWP, and the team responsible for managing the AWP program. Each option is going to affect the overall projected return on investment for your AWP program. We're going to share the forecasted ROI, return on investment, based on your choices. Now, if you're interested in calculating ROI for your projects, you have two options. O3 has a simple version that's available on our website, and the link is on the screen there. And that will give you some basic information. All you do is enter a few key pieces of information about the project, and you'll get a high-level indication of your return on investment. We also have a more detailed version that we can work through with you to complete that, to understand the project specifics and budgetary costs. So that'll give you a much more detailed analysis. And to do that, please reach out to us at any time. Okay, so on to our adventure. And here's the storyline. Your organization has decided that their next project will include advanced work packaging in order to address cost overruns and schedule slips that continue to plague every project. But first, and for our first question, nice and simple one, we need to pick a path. So which of these organizations are we going to choose to represent today? So our first poll is simply going to ask you, should we play this game as though we're the owner or as though we're the EPC? Poll is now open. Please take a few seconds and just make one of your choices. This doesn't necessarily have to be who you represent. It can just be a question of which of these do we want to run through for how we're going to go through the adventure today. Okay, Tori, I think we'll try and keep it short on the polling. I'm sure everybody's got the handle of this by now. So what are we looking at? Which direction are we going?
It looks like we're going in the owner direction.
Owners, okay, the one with the money. So here's the owner storyline. Your company, which we're calling today Big Energy, has been in this space for decades and has always relied on EPCs to deliver based on the scope, schedule, and budget that you defined. However, the last 10 projects have come in over budget and over schedule, which has cut into your profits significantly. The board, which is comprised of several CII members, firmly believes that AWP will help to arrest this decline and insists that you include AWP in your next bid. You've put together a strong RFP along with your bid package to identify what you will need to meet this expectation. So that's the project. That's an outline that's the outline of who we are. So we're the owner. Now we get to choose. We're looking at this as an AWP implementation. Our second poll question for you is, let's pick a path. Are we going to run a project that's $100 million, or are we going to look at a project that's $1 billion? So AWP historically always seemed to be targeted to the larger projects, and one of the most interesting advancements in AWP in the last 5 years or so has been that concept of scalability. And whilst $100 million TIC is not a small project, it certainly is sort of a layer down from where AWP started. So it'll be interesting to see what people want to see in terms of whether we look at this as $100 million or $1 billion TIC. Okay, we'll give everybody else another few seconds to answer. And then hopefully we have a simple choice of two. Okay, Tari, let's close out the poll and let's see what the results were.
It's going to be 100 million.
We're going 100 million. Excellent. So we are working on the more scalable side of things. And I think with the way we're seeing the world going these days, there's probably a lot more $100 million projects than there are $1 billion projects in the world right now. So excellent choice. So this $100 million greenfield project will form a receipt, metering, storage, and pump station complex in rural Alberta, Canada. It includes 2 general contractors for field disciplines and 2 additional contractors for off-site fabrication of pipe and steel. With 6 construction work areas, there's an expectation of 50 construction work packages and 400 installation work packages. So it is the smaller of the two, but it's still a good sized job. So now we get to our next question. At what stage is the project? So this is going to be one of those ones where we need to figure out when is the right time to implement AWP. And we don't need to say what we want it to be. We can say more along the lines of what we usually see. So if your company usually implements AWP at the start of construction, or whether you do it as early as FEL2 or early FEL3. And for those of you not familiar, that would be select and define or pre-feed and feed for the FEL2, FEL3. I know different companies call it different things. Okay. So
Andrew, that's going to be FEL2.
Okay, we're in the FEL stages. Excellent. You're getting started early in the project lifecycle, so kudos. You picked what will definitely be the sort of more helpful of those two answers. You can still make lots of great decisions about path of construction and priorities. You have enough time to get your AWP program set up, establish your process and standards, as well as what you'll need to make AWP a success. Getting alignment between the various stakeholders at this early stage will give your AWP implementation a solid foundation. So we're certainly leaning towards the best practice point at this time. Okay, so now it's time to select your AWP champion. And for those of you who saw the camera earlier, no, none of those represent me, thankfully. We have several great candidates on the shortlist. Each of them has specific strengths and weaknesses, and all of them will be involved in the project, but only one of them can be the AWP lead. So we're going to look at each of these candidates and assess them based on their skill set to find out who's best to lead AWP. So first up, we have Carl. Carl has been with the organization for more than 20 years. He's reliable and hardworking, but he's a little bit resistant to change. He's been working with projects successfully without technology for years and is disinterested in learning something new when his way has worked in the past. He's a dyed-in-the-wool field hand. He knows all about construction and is confident that he can organize the work to get maximum efficiency from the crew, just like he's been doing for years. Valeria. Valeria has been with the organization for 5 years and is a rising star. What she lacks in experience, she makes up for in team collaboration, inspiration, and enthusiasm. She doesn't always know the right answers, but she knows who to go to when she needs help solving a problem. She has experience in the field as a project engineer, and she knows her way around a job site. But she's also spent time in the office getting to know the inner workings of projects before they hit the field. Tarek. So Tarek's been with the organization for 10 years and knows every technology solution inside out. He's reliable and responsive, but not that great in a team environment. He's super sharp. He single-handedly built the company's data lake last year, but he doesn't have a strong understanding of what happens in the field. As a perennial office dweller, Tarek sees site construction as an exciting new challenge to get his teeth into, and believes that his technology background can help make site work more efficient. And our last choice for who's going to lead our AWP implementation is the project manager. So the project manager is the hub of the whole job and will, by necessity, be involved in all aspects of the work. A talented team player and delegator, your project manager knows how to organize, structure, and deliver complex projects while managing risk and all the associated dramas of modern engineering and construction dynamics. So this time we've given you a choice of 4. So we're going to open another poll for you, and I want you to tell me who we want to lead our AWP implementation on the project. So we'll give you a minute or so to register some responses. So are we looking at Carl, the 20-year veteran of the company who's an experienced field hand, Valeria, the recent 5-year experience project engineer, or we're looking at Tarek, who's more on the IT side of things and has been with the company 10 years, or do we want to consider our project manager? Okay, Tori, let me know when we've got some results coming in.
Looks like Valeria is going to be the winner by 57%, and then project manager was second place.
Okay, well, I'm going to be mean now because I'm not going to choose what you guys chose simply to show us something that's going to be a little bit interesting because it came up second. So we will circle back to Valeria, but the first one we're going to look at is the project manager. So your project manager sounds like an excellent choice because of their level of integration with everything else on the project, but it's not recommended to have your project manager be your AWP champion. Project manager typically has enough on their plate. Going down this path is going to mean they're either overworked or underperforming, and adding an AWP program to it typically means that instead of doing one job well, they'll do two jobs badly. So for those of you who said project manager, I hope you can forgive us for bringing that up. I'm just going to skip back to where we were and get back to the choice that we actually made. So we were in FEL, $100 million project, and we didn't select Carl, we selected Valeria. So let's have a look at Valeria's track. Okay. Next up, we're going to have a discussion about technology. So you've picked the person who is going to champion AWP for you. The who decision is made, but the how is still up for discussion. Your AWP champion is champing at the bit to start writing a procedure for you about how to implement AWP. Now you have to decide what tools you're going to use to support AWP. You can choose the path of least resistance. Use all the tools and programs that your company always uses for project execution, and use spreadsheets to fill in the gaps between them and centralize the data. That's going to be the quickest option and certainly the cheapest in terms of software costs. Everyone in your company knows how to use Excel, and you want to make sure that you get the process right before you go too far with new technology. Or you search the market to find software that's specifically designed to support AWP and is built around the best practice methodologies. You find software that can talk to your existing programs for scheduling, materials management, document management, etc. It's going to take a little bit of time to implement, and there will be a cost to the software, as well as training requirements for your people. But if it can do everything they say it can do, it will make the process of managing AWP and running the work in the field very smooth and integrated. So for our last part of audience participation, our last poll for today, are we going to use AWP technology? And this one's a very simple yes, no. Okay, so the poll is now open. So as a circle back, we're doing a $100 million project. We're starting it during the early FEL stages of the project, and we've chosen Valeria as our AWP champion. Now we just need to decide whether we're going to do this using our existing tools and processes with Excel to cover the gaps, or whether we're going to use a technology to support AWP. And it looks like we've got some results. So Tori, which way are we leaning?
Looks like yes, we will use technology.
And I'm intrigued, what percentage came up with that?
Yeah, 88% said yes.
88% said yes. So again, interesting results, because even something like a $100 million project, typically the AWP heavy, technology heavy projects have looked at the higher end of the spectrum. But again, as with AWP as a process, technology is helping to build that scalability into the AWP implementation so that it can be used on smaller projects, even far smaller than $100 million. So let's see where we end up. Okay, so we're using Valeria, we're using technology, we've even got our model on a Game Boy in the field. So we're going to fast forward to the middle of the construction phase. The AWP process is rocking and rolling. Work is happening in the agreed sequence, in line with the agreed path of construction. For the first time, all of our contractors have unprecedented visibility and real-time access to the status and progress of the project. All contractors, regardless of scope and discipline, have the ability to manage constraints and drive the AWP process. Work packages are flying out the door and little rework is needed. The aggressive schedule, because let's be honest, most modern construction projects have aggressive schedules, is being met and, in a lot of cases, improved on. Productivity is vastly improved from previous projects, and time on tools is seeing a huge increase. The project executives are delighted and are confident of success. So let's have a look at Valeria's report out. Our AWP implementation exceeded all our expectations. We went all in, using what CII refers to as Category D, full AWP. We got great alignment across engineering, procurement, and construction right from the start. Our path of construction was well thought through and achievable. Our software guided us through the process from day one and made sure we stayed aligned with the best practices. Once we got to the field, we knew where everything was, what was available to us, and how to manage our constraints. The crews were more efficient and, importantly, they enjoyed their work. And apparently, we're up for an award. Can't wait for the next project. So Valeria is obviously very, very happy with the results of what we've done today. These are some of the ideas of some of the things that we've been able to give to Valeria to help with the implementation of AWP. So we've got dashboards for work package tracking. We've got status visualization and full graphical work packaging for the field for building the IWPs. And we've even got mobility options using iPads in the field for things like field progressing. So building that level of technology in and doing so very, very early were the keys to the success on this project. So this just gives you a quick overview of what we were talking about in terms of the timing, some of the categories, and some of the trophies that we won. So looking at the project as the phases from engineering, procurement, construction, and turnover, we did what we referred to as Category D, i.e. we managed to do AWP right from the beginning in the FEL stages all the way through to commissioning. Now, some of the other options that we could have chosen would have seen us just doing workplace planning. So for example, if we'd chosen to say that the project is at the construction stage, quite honestly, if you're just starting construction, you're not doing AWP. You're just doing workplace planning. And in those cases, you lose out on a lot of the aspects that you're going to win from AWP itself. We've also got Category C, basic AWP, where we take that foundational platform of workplace planning and start bringing it back into the engineering stages. But we're not yet taking it all the way back to the FEL 2-3 stages, and we're not taking it all the way on the other end to the turnover. So for all of the available trophies in our little game that we played today, you won every single one of them. We've got path of construction, fabrication and modular strategy, turnaround planning. We've got an integrated EPC schedule. We've got a startup sequence early on in the project. We built engineering work packages, procurement work packages, installation work packages, construction work packages. We did constraint management. We looked at status visualization. We did graphical and non-graphical work packaging, integrated materials management, mobile field progressing, and turnover packages. So this is the top score, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to tell you, you picked the perfect path to get us to the result. So obviously there's a focus today on the technology side of things. O3 provides the only comprehensive purpose-built AWP solution for every phase of the project, right from early engineering to commissioning and startup. What you see on the screen and what we've shown you today with some of these screenshots is just a high-level overview of the various features and capabilities. So what we've highlighted today are components of our on-build solution, but I invite you to check out our solution suite on the website and in our virtual exhibit here in the conference portal. It's also been a case historically that there was an understanding that in order to implement AWP, you first needed to go away and get your procedures written and your practices established and in place, and then worry about the technology, because the technology almost became a bolt-on that you tried to mold around how you were going to implement it. One of the biggest advances we've seen, and one of the things that O3 has been able to help drive within the industry, is because our platform is built on the best practices, you can implement it at the same time as building your procedures, building your plans, and the two will mesh together very well. The software will actually help you to create those procedures and make sure they're in line with the best practices. So it's no longer a question of going away and doing a theoretical exercise for a year and writing a big procedure and then trying to implement technology. The two now go very well hand in hand. So we're going to look at some possible return on investment for our various scenarios, and I'm kind of giving you here the sort of cheat sheet for what we could have chosen. So we did the $100 million project, and we said that we were going to do this during FEL. If we'd chosen Tarek, the answer you would have got back was to say, actually, you know what, Tarek's not really a team player. What you need from an AWP champion is somebody who's going to be able to bring everybody together. So that would have been a fail point for us. We did have an option for Carl to be your AWP champion during FEL. And Carl, being old school, the natural leaning towards the technology question was going to be no. So Carl ends up having the option to implement Category C, that AWP, the basic AWP, but it doesn't work because he's the wrong person to do it. He doesn't want to play nicely with others. He's just going to revert to his old style of delivering projects. Hand me a stack of isometrics and I'll go figure it out for myself. So even though we started at the right time, doing it with the wrong person and not having the technology to support the process was going to see us getting a fail. And basically that comes out with an almost zero return on investment. You chose for the $100 million project the best possible solution. So Valeria was going to be the one who was going to be able to bring everybody together, had enough knowledge of the field and the home office to be able to get everybody involved, and given enough time to do it by doing it starting during the FEL stages. Knowing that also she wasn't going to be afraid of something like getting the software in place and building a new process and procedure for the company. For a $100 million project, we're showing a return on investment, which is the delta between your cost and your savings. So if your savings are $3 million and your cost is $500,000, your ROI is 2.5. So for $100 million, we're showing an ROI of 2.5 million. For Tarek unfortunately got involved in doing AWP at the construction stage. So Tarek is essentially reverting to work-face planning. Because of who Tarek was, we still gave him some software, but because we're only doing it during the construction stage, we're lacking some of that upfront capability. So even on the same project, Tarek's path got us down to 1.17 million. And then we essentially have very similar results for the $1 billion track, except the ROI was obviously scaled to the size of the project. So let's have a look at some of our lessons learned. Firstly, timing is critical. The earlier, the better. And I know O3's produced a blog post about this, that timing really is everything on a project. Too many times we get approached by contractors, owners, EPCs. Yes, we want to do AWP. Well, yeah, and our project is just starting to pour our foundations and we're going to start mechanical work next month. You've already lost a lot of the benefit that you can find from that. So if you're going to making decisions about AWP, pick a pilot project that allows you to get in early and make some real changes during the early FEL stages. It's exactly like constructability. Constructability is a big drop-off in terms of its usefulness after the early stages. Choosing the right AWP champion is important. The person and the people on the pilot project are going to be critical. You need an AWP champion who's going to be able to pull everybody together and get everybody working in unison. Technology is going to greatly improve your implementation success. It's not a question of just being a pretty picture. Your 3D model for engineering is no longer just a diagram that you put on the wall. These things are really, really going to be able to help you drive this process in the field. And quite honestly, the size of the project doesn't matter. Now, that being said, there is a lower limit. If you're doing a $100,000 project that's buying a piece of equipment and one IWP to put it in, you're not probably going to do the whole AWP suite. But we're long gone are the days when AWP was only talked about in billion-dollar circles. We're seeing it implemented on small portfolio projects where the projects are, hundreds of thousands, $500,000, all the way up to a few million. So we're seeing it on individual projects with very low TICs, and we're seeing it all the way up to still those large mega projects. Some of the things we didn't cover today, but are very important to remember, while the owner or EPC didn't make a difference. So the first question that we asked you, are you the owner or the EPC, didn't affect the outcome of where we're going today. Simply because those people are the ones who are furthest upstream and get to have the greatest influence over the project. That being said, AWP is always easier with owner support. If the owner's bought into it, it's going to be much, much simpler to achieve. If you're going to be fighting the owner the whole way, or if the owner isn't invested in it, it's going to be harder to make it a success. There's also another important thing to understand, and one of the reasons why our ROIs weren't particularly high, given the project size, is because there's a lot of this comes with AWP maturity. The first time you do this, you will likely not achieve the 10% ROI savings that CII talks about. Because if you notice, when CII talks about that 10% saving, that's a goal, it's an aspirational thing, and it only happens for those companies in the highest level of AWP maturity. We were playing a scenario here today where we were doing this for the first time. So the ROI reflects the fact that this is a first time implementation for us, and we're still going to have lots of lessons learned. So, as I say, I'm delighted to tell you, you picked exactly the right path, Valeria, on starting an FEL, using Valeria and using technology to do it was exactly the right way to go. So I'm delighted to see that it looks like the vast majority of our audience already knew the right answers to the questions. And with that in mind, we will segue now into questions and see if anyone's got anything they want to ask us today. Tari, is there anything coming through on the chat? Anybody else, please feel free to put any questions in the chat window. We've got, because you guys picked the best path right from the get-go, we've got about 20 minutes to give you time to ask and answer some questions, so feel free to fire away.
Yeah, we've got a couple here. Let's see. Let's start with, why didn't it matter if we chose owner or EPC?
So really what it boils down to there, I mean, like I said, you want the owner's support, but ultimately the decision making around implementing AWP is going to be decided by the person who has most control over the process. So the owner is obviously a great one to mandate it because they can say, thou shalt do this. But the EPC, if that EPC is brought in early enough, because they're the EPC and have control over the engineering, the procurement, and the construction, assuming that they are the EPC from the earliest possible phase, such as FEL2, they can do AWP with or without a mandate from the owner. And many EPCs these days are choosing to do AWP, whether it's a stipulation or not. So whilst it's great to have that level of owner support, because the EPC covers a lot of the basis for what AWP impacts, they can choose to do that very effectively even without the owner in
there. Okay, and here's another one. When is the right time to implement AWP technology?
Well, the technology question comes back to essentially the same thing as the implementation of AWP itself. So from a company-wide, like if you're starting AWP process as a company, the best time to implement it is right from the start, in the same time frame that you're building those procedures and starting out that process of defining how AWP is going to work for your company. It's like I was saying earlier, it's no longer a requirement to sit down and spend 12 months or 18 months sitting with somebody deciding the best way to do AWP and then go looking for a technology solution. The technology can help you build that platform very early. So from a sort of organizational standpoint, if you're getting into AWP, quite honestly, the sooner the better. From a project standpoint, it's going to play into that ROI conversation. If you start looking at AWP and the technology a week before you go to the field, you will get lesser results. You're just going to get work-based planning. Whereas if you're able to get in with the technology early in the process, like for example, O3 has a complete range of solutions that includes the ability to do digital project management, agile project management for your early stages. We can help with early phase deliverables, action tracking, RFIs. We can work with you all the way through the design stages of a project, building design work packages to help engineering. It's not just anymore a question of building IWPs for the field. In fact, one of the earlier presentations today, very, very simple comment, IWPs are the easy part. Although I will say IWPs are the easy part if you've done the upfront work. So it's important to make sure that you get your system set up, and also defining it early will give you an opportunity to understand your data requirements, understand what information you're going to need to support AWP. If you do it too late, it's going to be a very difficult fight. So quite honestly, short answer, sooner the better.
Okay, and then here's another one that just came in. How do you define work package for engineering and procurement?
How do you define the work packages for engineering and procurement? I'm not sure I exactly understand what you're getting at, but I mean, essentially what we're looking at here is it's typically defined, you use the basis, the simplest methodology is to define it as a basis of area and discipline. And the breakdown that you're going to need is going to be dependent on the size, the scale, and the complexity of the project. But the simplest backbone to any of this from an AWP process is going to be the area and discipline setup. So within each area, within each discipline is going to provide you with an engineering work package. Now that engineering work package at its simplest is going to be, here's all the pipe in area 4, here's all the steel in area 6, whatever it is. And that engineering work package is going to provide you with the engineering information, and critically only the engineering information. So it's going to be the scope of work, it's going to be the drawings, the specs, the standards, copy of the 3D model, the material takeoff. It's going to be any of those technical deliverables that comes from engineering that then gets translated over to a construction work package, typically on a one-to-one, but I know there are occasions when we don't do it on a one-to-one for practicality reasons. That construction work package then takes the engineering technical information and adds construction detail to it to make that the basis for a bid. And as for the procurement work package side of things, every engineering work package should come with a list of materials. And the procurement work package is essentially the mechanism by which we go about buying the materials associated with that engineering work package. The procurement gets a little bit more interesting though, because you don't buy in isolation. You could always end up taking, if you've got several work packages all relating to pipe, you're not going to go and buy 1,000 linear foot of 8-inch pipe for this package and then another 1,000 linear foot of 8-inch pipe for another package 2 weeks later. So you'll look at that from a procurement standpoint for things like your common materials, your bulks, and do some consolidation work so that you can still do some of that volume purchasing that gives us the best price. Hopefully that answered the question. If it doesn't, please type in a follow-up and we can get into a bit more detail.
Okay, and here's a couple more. Does the technology change if you start in FEL or just in construction?
The technology itself doesn't change, your use of it will change. So that diagram that we showed, sort of that thing that looked like a rising sun at the beginning, O3's suite of solutions it's one solution, it's one product, and it has components of that you use at different times. So for example, if you're starting this during construction, you're not going to be able to make the most of some of the design work tools that we have, for example. So you, in the same way as you lose out on some of the benefits, you will not end up using some of the aspects of the tool. Now, that being said, the vast majority of what we in a lot of technology does is to make the process of building those IWPs and managing constraints and managing the work package in the field, what we refer to as on build, much, much simpler. But there are tools and products and parts of our solution suite that work much earlier than that you would lose the ability to gain from if you don't do it until you're just starting construction.
Okay, and then how well does O3 work if I don't have a model?
Yeah, great question, and especially as we're talking about the scalability issue. I mean, I think we all take a 3D model as expecting it to be a standard requirement, and some projects just don't do it. So that's why what we look at, take a look at for the workplace planning in the field, we look at it as graphical work packaging, which is the concept of using that 3D model, and non-graphical work packaging, which can be things like using lists. So if you've got your cable schedule, that's not modeled anyway. So whether you have a model or not, we can take that cable schedule and build work packages from that cable schedule. So there's a lot we can do, very effective workplace planning with or without a model. Now, that being said, do not get me wrong, the model is a very, very, very useful tool. If you have the choice to do a project and you can use the model and you're planning to implement AWP, the model is a brilliant tool. That doesn't mean we can't do AWP without it. If you don't have a model, we can still do very good constraint management. We can look, we understand where your materials are. We can set up associations to your engineering data. We can tie into your P6 schedule. We can build and manage and track and execute and close out IWPs non-graphically with lists, and we can take the spools from your fabricator and build IWPs from those. So it's easier to do it graphically. It's more powerful to do it graphically. Some of the things like the status visualization, where you can see your progress as an overlay on the model using colors, is incredibly powerful. But if you don't have it, it's not an impediment to you can still get the work done.
Okay, and then you referred to CII implementation levels. Where can I find those?
Yeah, so those categories that we talked about, and for those eagle-eyed amongst you, we looked at categories B, C, and D, so I'm sure somebody was wondering where the heck is category A. So those are found, and those are created in the maturity level benefits tool. So for those of you who are CII members, you can access that through the AWP section of the CII website. And what that maturity level benefits tool does is it looks at 4 different categories, where category A is we're not doing AWP. So that's kind of like your base case, your datum. And it says for each of these categories, B being workplace planning, C being workplace planning plus some elements of AWP, and then D being full AWP, it has a series of benefits. So we can say, if you do this, you will get these benefits, and the benefits stack on each other. So C gets all of B's benefits plus C's benefits, and D gets basically all of the benefits. And that sheet gives you, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it gives you a lot of detail about what the costs are going to be, it looks at people, process, technology. So it looks at what the tech stack is going to be able to do this, who you're likely to need in terms of personnel to be able to do this, and when. And it builds on that to show if you do this. So it looks at the cost side of it, and then gets into here's the benefits, and it ties in with the CII ROI tool, the return on investment tool, which looks at the same sort of idea from the sense of, depending on which level you're choosing to implement AWP and the timing of your implementation, here's what you're going to get out of it. So it shows some of that sliding scale that we were talking about earlier, where if you're doing full AWP and you're doing it early enough, like we looked at in our example today, it gives you an indication of the varying levels of return on investment that you can expect.
All right, and we just put the link to that tool in the chat if you want to check that out. It's for CII members. So to follow up on that question, does O3 help with data connections to support AWP? And if we don't get any, no, sorry, I was reading the wrong thing. Yeah, does O3 help with data connections to support AWP?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our strengths is the fact that we're not going to come into your company and say, you need to replace everything you currently do. You have certain best of breed solutions for certain elements of the work that you already do, and you have existing tools and processes within your company. The O3 solution, much like AWP itself, sits as like a hub in the middle. So we will talk to your engineering document management system. We will talk to your materials management system. We will talk to your scheduling system. When I say talk to, there's a couple of levels of that, one of which can be something as simple as Excel or CSV flat files sent back and forth and imported, or more for those more tech savvy and capable of in terms of the technology side of it, we can set up what we refer to as APIs, which is essentially the two computers talking to each other without a person sitting in the middle. Every single implementation that we do requires these types of integrations to be done. We very rarely go in and just have O3 as a standalone, because a lot of the companies that we're dealing with have existing ways of doing things. So we don't want to come in and say, don't use Primavera anymore. We're going to come in and say, okay, you've got Primavera. We can talk to that. We can take the data from Primavera and pull it into our system so that when you're scheduling your IWPs, you know that you've got a single source of truth, that your schedule and your work packaging software agree on what those are. So those kind of links, exactly like AWP itself, are a critical ability to implement successfully, because if you can't have each department and each facet and each technology talking to each other, AWP is a very, very hard thing to do.
Okay, a couple more questions here, Andrew. So what can you find in constraint management function? How does the constraint be detected? Or I think this is trying to say, how can the constraint be detected and found?
So some constraints are going to be automated, and some are going to be manual. So typically the list of constraints is something that's it's going to be fairly standard across a lot of projects, and some of them, for example, like when you build a work package, you can, especially if you're building it graphically using a model. Let's take the example where you're doing a piping IWP. You pull in 6 or 7 spools into a piping package and you use that to build your IWP for piping for a single crew for a single week. So some of the automatic constraints that we can do is, because of the tie that we have between our technology and your other solution suites, like your engineering document management system and your materials management system, we can say that we know that those model components relate to isometrics XYZ. And to do that, we know that here's the materials associated with it. So we can create automatic constraints that say, you need to have these drawings and you need to have these materials. We can also automatically populate additional constraints that we can agree with you as part of our implementation that say, you can have constraints like, have you walked the site? Have you actually put your boots on, got up and walked out there to check that there's physical space to do this work? We'll also have constraints for review and approval of IWPs. Have the right people looked at this and signed off on these IWPs? And you also have, as well as those automatic constraints, you have the ability to create additional constraints for anything that you know specific to that work. And once all those constraints have been identified, it then just becomes a question of managing them and closing them out so that you know, okay, now those pipe spools have arrived on site. We can close out our material constraint. We've got those engineering drawings IFC. We can close out that constraint, et cetera, to the point where the IWP, when it's the IWP gets released when it's completely constraint free.
Okay, Andrew, looks like we have just a couple more questions here. How do you deal with changes on the 3D model, especially when 3D model construction components have been already assigned to IWPs and incur some changes?
Well, I'd love to sit here and tell you that nothing ever changes in a 3D model, but I'm sure the people in the audience, especially the person that asked the question, knows that that's not the case. The biggest issue, and certainly the biggest important factor with it, is the upstream data. So if there are changes to the model, those need to be changed in the model ideally. And then what we do is we get an updated copy of that model. So the first time we get the model, it's very rarely the 100% complete final model. We're typically working, exactly as construction is, while engineering is still ongoing. So if you get changes to the model, our system will interrogate that model to be able to understand exactly which components have changed from the original engineering model to what we call the virtual construction model. And then we can look at those to understand which work packages they're in. So if you, for instance, change a component that's already in a work package, the planner will receive a notification to say, hey, you built this work package, this component has changed. Then it becomes a question of change management protocol to say, okay, I've got to look at me as the planner. I have to look at the status of that work package. And if it hasn't been issued yet, I can just update the work package, change, acknowledge the change, incorporate the change, and reissue the work package. If that work package is already in the field being built, you need to go and find out what stage it's at. You need to go and understand whether that thing has already been installed, in which case then it becomes true change management in the sense that we have to then go and decide, how are we going to do this? We've already installed it. Do you want us to pull it out, leave it as is, which becomes the basis for an RFI, etc. And if it's already been installed and finished, then it simply becomes oftentimes a question of rework in the field. So the biggest issue and the biggest thing to concern yourself with is changes in the field are much easier to manage, especially from a graphical standpoint, when the engineering model is being updated. If you get to the stage of the project where they stop updating the engineering model and start throwing changes at you, it becomes a more difficult process to manage. So one of the things the owners need to do is make sure that they mandate that the changes to the model need to be managed by the engineering contractor, not just try to get them off the project and off the charge code as soon as possible. Anything else, Tori, or should we give everybody 5 minutes of their morning back?
I think that's it, and that's perfect timing because I think that's
Fantastic.
all the time we're going to have anyway. So you can go ahead and close us out.
Wonderful. Well, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you found that informative, and if any of you have any questions, our information is here right on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to O3 at any time. And we look forward to, hopefully next year, we look forward to doing this same thing live rather than virtual. Thank you all. Let's close out the session.